One of the really interesting things about airsoft is there's a lot of crossover that goes on between different genres, where it's not necessarily all milsim or all necessarily speedball, but there's a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy and even cosplay guys that get in here, because it's amazing the number of guys that show up with just like, you know, Nerf swords and lightsabers to play airsoft. So there's always a certain amount of different genres that get into airsoft for different reasons. So you're not always interested in playing with guns that necessarily look like military grade firearms. There's a lot of guys that want to get in and play with stuff that looks more sci-fi and fantasy, which I kind of have a little bit of a passing interest in. I was a Star Wars fan growing up, and one of the things that I wanted to do was to get a gun that was not exactly, but more reminiscent of the blaster that the stormtroopers used in the original Star Wars. You can of course buy guns that are out there that are prefab that you know, automatically look like that, but I kind of like to do a little bit of my own work and sort of tinker a little bit and come up with my own sort of version of it. So what we're going to talk about today is just something that I've come up with on just sort of a lark on how to build your own Star Wars style blaster out of a G&G Raider. All right, once you've committed to doing this, one of the really nice things about doing this sort of project is it's undoable. So if you want to go back to your original gun, just save all of your parts and you can always bolt it back together. So to get started, what you're going to do is go ahead and remove the stock and the fore end. There's just a couple of bolts and this just slides off of the gun. There's a central screw down the buffer tube and your stock should pull off of the back, and you'll end up with something that looks like this. Now, we've of course already shortened the length of the barrel. For this particular project, because we're adding a tracer unit on the end of there, you're going to need a very short barrel, so you're going to need to shorten your inner barrel. You can of course buy a pre-made inner barrel to that specific length, or you can cut it down yourself. I prefer to just use a pipe cutter, and this is called a tapered reamer. What you do is you just take your pipe cutter, you cut the inner barrel down, and then just use the tapered reamer to cut out any burrs that may get formed on the inside of the barrel once you cut it down, and you end up with something like this. Now, you're stuck with it once you do that, and if you want to go back to your original barrel length, you're going to have to go out and buy another barrel, which of course speaks for itself, but that's the easiest way to get exactly the size barrel you need, is to just go ahead and cut it down. The stock that we put on this is the APS CQB Patriot, which is a very nice compact system that gives you a fairly large compartment for putting a battery. You can see we've got an 11.1 LiPo that very easily fits into this compartment, and it's just got this little plug that fits onto the end of it and gives you a very nice compact system for starting out with. The next thing you're going to need for this particular project is a fairly small outer barrel. The one we're using here is a Golden Eagle / JG. This is a 93 millimeter outer barrel that fits right into our existing setup. This is one of the things that I love about G&G, is that it's a standard Tokyo Marui compatible, so a lot of your aftermarket parts are going to easily fit onto this system. The other thing we're going to be doing is adding a different fore end onto it. The thing with this is we want something that's large enough that our tracer unit can easily fit into. So the one that we are using here is a model SM4-99. This is made by SRC. It's a fairly easy system to install. First of all, you just put the barrel nut over your barrel and just simply screws down. There are, of course, all of these holes around the outside of it that gives you an easy place to use your armorer's tool for tightening this down. Once that's tightened, you just simply replace the fore end with this system here. Now, the way to put this on is this part here in the back goes towards the back of the gun, so this just simply screws on. And once it's tightened down, you just simply get it threaded on to the point that you want it to. And once that's where you want it, all you simply do is just line up the rails, and this little section that I showed you earlier goes on top. You tighten this down, and that allows you to have it centered up exactly where you need it. All right, now of course you can do this without a tracer unit on it, but I thought it would add an extra sort of level of realism to it to actually be able to see sort of the laser bolts coming out of the gun when you're shooting. So I've decided to go with the G&G NightHawk tracer unit. The reason I like this is it's a fairly compact system, so you don't have to extend it really long. If you're familiar with the movie, the blasters that they used were a fairly short length, so I'm trying to keep this to a fairly minimal size. And as far as I know, G&G makes one of the probably the shorter tracer units. This uses AAA batteries that simply go on the inside of it, and this fits onto your standard 14mm negative threads. One of the things about this, since you do have to be able to replace the batteries and turn the unit on and off, is you're going to want to have fairly easy access to it. You can get something in there to be able to turn the switch on and off, but it's also nice to just be able to unthread it. And as you can see, it fits very easily into that fore end, so your suppressor in your fore end makes a very nice sort of custom look to it. Unfortunately, at the time that I did this, the only one that was available to me was one of these bronze ones, but you can get these in black if you want to get that sort of all-in-one kind of look to it. Now, the fore end that goes on the original Star Wars blaster was part of the folding stock that goes on the British Sterling, which of course is not possible for this gun, but I still wanted to have that look. If you remember the design of those blasters, it had sort of a bit of a grip at the fore end of it. So what I've decided to go with is the Valken folding Foregrip, which is something like this. I like it because it has a nice futuristic look to it. It bolts right on, and it gives you that sort of look that we're going for with the Star Wars blaster. Now, the scope that comes on the original Star Wars blaster is a World War II surplus model, which of course there are no AIRSOFT versions that are out there, but there are a lot of similar scopes that are on the market. The one that we're going to be using today is, this is a UTG, this is an SCP-DS3039W. If you want to look one of these up. UTG makes some very good mil-spec grade stuff. I like them because you could take this off of your airsoft gun and put it on your .308 rifle and it'll handle the recoil versus some of the cheaper airsoft grade scopes that are out there. This will handle just about anything you can throw at it. And it has the kind of high-tech look that we're going for. One really nice feature about this is that you don't need any tools in order to mount this. It just simply clamps right on. And it has that sort of look that we're going for of the original Star Wars blaster. Now, of course, having a flashlight on the gun was not part of the original Star Wars system, but I find it terribly useful, especially for playing indoor CQB when we're playing in low lights, to have a flashlight. Number one, it's great for blinding your opponents and just generally maneuvering and getting an idea of where you are and sort of throwing the other guy off. This is a great idea. One problem I have with mounting flashlights on guns is, number one, it's hard to get them in exactly the right position that you want them in. A lot of guys like to mount those remote pressure pads on different parts of the gun so that they can get to the on-off switch. Which I find somewhat problematic because they have those wires and the little pigtails that run back and forth. It's easy to snag those on different things as you're maneuvering, and they get torn out very easily. So I find it easier to actually mount the light in a spot where you can get to it fairly quickly. What we're using here is a UTG tri-rail. This is an offset that allows you to mount the light in sort of a non-standard kind of way. So what we're trying to do here is to put the light where I can easily access the on-off switch while I'm naturally holding it, so I don't have to shift my hand position. So you'll see we have our grip here, and that allows me to easily get to the on-off switch, which is very easy to strobe my opponents if you want to blind them. Now, this of course is not part of the original Star Wars rig, but it still has a nice high-tech look to it, and I think it sort of completes the kind of sci-fi look that we're going for here. Now, as far as feeding the gun, you're going to probably want to get some sort of mag, and if you're trying to keep with the original look of the Star Wars blaster, you're going to want something fairly small because they didn't have giant magazines coming out of their units. So probably the best mag for sticking with the original look are these original Vietnam era 20-round mags, which give you a fairly compact way of feeding the gun. Of course, these don't hold quite as many rounds as a regular high capacity mag, and you can also get these as mid-cap, so if you're one of those guys that likes to do the mid-cap thing, these are available for either high capacity or mid caps. Although I have to say, for using a tracer unit, I like using these mags that have the built-in UV lights that actually brighten up the BBs a little bit more before they go through your tracer. This is a J mag that has a built-in UV light. You can see when I open the thing up, it activates the light in there. And that actually gives you even a brighter system for lighting up your BBs. And the other feature that I like about this is it has this sort of side-mounted winder rather than on the bottom, so it's very easy to wind the thing without having to shift your hand position too much and keep the gun at the ready. So that's the basics on building a Star Wars E11 Stormtrooper style blaster out of a G&G Raider. You can see you come up with something that looks completely different using some basic, fairly available airsoft parts. If you want to see about building one of these for yourself, you can look it up in the links. We've got all of the links for all of the different parts that we've used on this particular gun, or come on down to the showroom. We've got the gun available here. You can take it out for a round and try it out for yourself. Or if you need us to build one for you, just let us know and we'll work with you on designing your own personal custom blaster. So come on down to the showroom and we'll see you on the next go round. And until then, don't let the bastards get you down.